What is good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another SK Wealth Academy podcast. So let's get started. This is kind of going to be like a bonus edition of the financial news of the horrific and parasitic, because I'm going to concentrate on Bitcoin in this particular podcast, even though I have said many times I consider my expertise to be in precious metals, gold, silver, platinum, etc., and not in Bitcoin whatsoever. But I will have very important things I think every single Bitcoin owner should be aware of and should find immensely valuable, because there's been no Bitcoin owner that I've ever spoken to in my entire lifetime, I'm serious, that was aware of these topics that I'm going to speak of in this podcast. And one should, if one owns Bitcoin, one should 100% be aware of all these developments of which I'm going to speak. So before I get started, I want to say, first of all, give big gratitude towards the most recent donors of my GoFundMe campaign, which actually ends this weekend, before November 23rd. So if you would like to help me launch my 22 course online academy, SK Wealth Academy, and we'll kick back some type of benefit, most likely like discount on the classes once the academy goes live, to everyone that's donated. But let me first start by thanking Eric Bender from bicyclesports.com. Go check out his website, bicyclesports.com. Hansel Clydesdale and Douglas Cohn, and the last person was anonymous. So I don't know who the anonymous person that donated $100 towards my launch, but thank you so much, anonymous person, for doing so. So I do really appreciate that. Unfortunately, due to my Rona travel lockdown situation, because I haven't been able to return home since March, I'm unable to actually access that particular website, because I have a relative running this campaign for me in the US, and been able to go thank you personally through emails until I gain my freedom, which might not be till next year. So who knows? So anyways, let's get started. So what do I want to talk about? Oh, by the way, so I'll put the link in the show notes below on YouTube if you would like to be so generous as to make a last minute donation to my GoFundMe campaign. So you will be able to find it there. Okay, now let's get started. So today, what I wanted to speak about, as I said, it's a number of topics. I am going to speak about Bitcoin, because there's a lot of things going on about Bitcoin's price, of course, with its really sharp rise since this past September, in this fourth quarter of this year. Because September 30th, I believe, is only $10,600. I don't know, I have my notes, so I will confirm that. And now it's like over $17,700. So it's been on a massive spike in the fourth quarter of this year. But there are some very misleading things being said right now, which I think is very important for all owners to understand. Of course, that's being propagated by people selling their books, meaning some of the biggest Bitcoin owners in the world, like Mike Novogratz of Digital Galaxy, the guy that, what's his name, Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, but the owner of Square, because their investments in Bitcoin have been massive, so they're just talking their book up. And I've said the crazy, people get angry at me sometimes when I just point out factual things, but I've said the exact same things about gold bugs too, because some crazy gold bugs have been saying for years gold was going to go to $5,000 every single year, or even some were saying $10,000, $20,000 every single year in a row, when the price action was not validating such prediction. And I called them crazy too. so I'm an equal opportunity fact relayer, okay? But the first thing I wanted to start, which is really interesting, because I'll put the link in the show notes below, because on April 29th, on my YouTube SK Wealth Academy channel, I actually said that there was a BLS-4 which is the highest risk level of these laboratories that are studying various viruses, and a lot of people have asserted that BLS-4 Labs, there's really no concrete need in the world for that, unless it's for the development of bioweapons. So there's a lot of scientists that basically say if a lab is classified as BLS-4, its only purpose is to develop bioweapons. And I mentioned back on April 29th, and again, I'll put the link to the podcast below. And once you go check out that podcast, you can see the exact timestamp, because that podcast was like, I think 45 minutes long or something like that. So you can see the exact timestamp where I talked about a BLS-4 lab being present in Lombardy, where they were apparently scientists were also researching and studying coronaviruses. So the fact that Lombardy was the region of Italy that was hardest hit, in addition to Wuhan, I basically just raised the issue back then in my podcast in April, which no journalist, and I use that term very lightly in air quotes, of journalists, because they're all basically just puppets for the ruling class, and no one that works for mass media actually does any type of investigative journalism. They're basically just relayers of the ruling class narrative. So there is no one in the mass media that basically even suggested a possibility that the virus could have originated as a leak from that BLS-4 lab, since it was being studied there in Lombardy. And the interesting thing is, so I'll put the link to all the BLS-4 labs around the world, because some people go to that other place where that's still common for fact checking. I think it's super popular on YouTube and Facebook, although the founder of Wikipedia said it hasn't been a reliable source of facts for years. One of the co-founders of Wikipedia said that years ago, but yet Mark Zuckerberg, as a shill for the ruling class, ignores that statement. So does Google and YouTube, and they still always refer to Wikipedia, because some people go to Wikipedia and say, hey, I don't see any listing for, I looked up BLS-4 labs and there's nothing listed in Lombardy, in Italy. It's only in Rome, but I will give you a link that will say, and I wouldn't be surprised if Wikipedia just, they censored that information from their page of BLS-4 labs operating around the world, because of the fact that some people might have made that link, as I did all the way back in April. So now what we see is that Reuters in Italy has reported this month in November in a scientific magazine, Tomori Journal, that basically looked at approximately 960 volunteers in a lung cancer screening trial. And then they tested them for the antibodies for coronavirus. And this trial happened between September 2019 and March of 2020. So they found that there were 4 cases that dated back to the first week of October that were tested positive for antibodies, which means they got infected in September. And in fact, even before the first cases were reported in Wuhan. And it's really interesting, because if you look up the articles, even in the article link I'm going to provide you, the narrative being propagated by Reuters, which of course is a mass media news source, is that they say now, we know that the virus spread from China before it was originally thought, even though the first case reported in Italy now has been discovered to precede the first case in Wuhan, China. They're not saying that the virus could have originated in Italy and then spread to China. They're still saying that, it just spread from China to Italy earlier than we previously thought. So look at that narrative. I mean, they're not even considering, obviously, one of the more obvious considerations, which would be that the virus actually originated in Italy and not at the BLS-4 lab, and somehow escaped and not in China. So I find that to be extremely, extremely curious as far as how it's being reported. So The other thing I want to get to real briefly is the Great Reset, because that seems to be trending on Twitter this week. And we all know Klaus Schwab, who was one of the founders of the World Economic Forum and still otherwise known as the WEF, and still the executive chairman, said the world will, quote, never return to normal, end quote. So again, it's this psychological warfare being waged against us by the ruling class, and they're trying to prime us to never want to have the freedoms that we used to have and take for granted, like being able to travel wherever you wanted to, being able to walk around without a face mask, being able to hug our friends, being able to shake hands. And he's now saying that the world will never return to normal, which I find really rich, because none of these rich fat cats abide by any of the rules that they try to impose upon us, which has been seen time and time and time again. I don't care what country it's been in, whether it's been Australia, whether it's France, whether it's Germany, whether it's Spain, whether it's Portugal, whether it's the Netherlands, whether it's where else, whether it's in Scotland, Ireland, England, America. We all see the politicians, they enforce these draconian mandates, and we all see them violating them. We all see them violating them just sometimes even just hours after they go on TV and hand down these draconian mandates, and then we see an hour later them ignoring the exact mandates they threatened to imprison people for or fine them like 10,000 pounds for violating, and then we see them routinely violating them all the time. So of course, the world will never return to normal. They just mean for the serfs, for us, but not for them, because they'll continue to socially distance themselves, like who was it, David Geffen, on their, I don't know how much his yacht was, but he posted a shot trying to virtue signal, saying, I'm doing my part, socially distancing, and meanwhile he was on some like multi-$100 million yacht. That was his that was his example of how what kind of sacrifices he was making to socially distance. So those rich fat cats are never going to abide by the same rules they try to apply to us. Okay, so let's move on. So now what did I want to say about Bitcoin? Okay, so like I said about gold, right? And again, congratulations to everyone that's like made a lot of money, because you've done better than me. But I've always said that I'm not really willing to speculate, because I don't want to gamble with my money. I'd rather be, like the slow and steady person putting money into gold and silver, having it steadily accumulate, as it has done from $250 in 2001 to $1,900, and silver from $4 to its current price of like $24 right now. So, I'm fine with that, right? Because I don't want to gamble with my retirement money. I'd rather just make slow and simple returns. And if, you made like 100%, this year Bitcoin, then big up to you. Big congratulations. Like, I'm not hating on that at all. But this is what I'm saying, is we have to all realize that people like Mike Novogratz, he said that Bitcoin would probably spike to around $20,000 by the fourth quarter of this year. And it looks like he could be correct. But we have to also know that in 2018, he said Bitcoin was going to hit 40,000 by the end of that year. He said Bitcoin was going to hit 40,000 by the end of 2019. And then he said, it will hit 40,000 by the end of 2020. And so those three things were completely wrong. So in some sense, number one, you have to realize he's selling his book, because he's the CEO or owner of Galaxy Digital. You know how much money Galaxy Digital has dumped into Bitcoin? Galaxy Digital right now holds about $300 million in Bitcoin. So of course he's going to say whatever can convince other people to go in, because it's going to help his book increase in value. Like Jack Dorsey, I told you, at Twitter Square, right now they own more than $80 million in Bitcoin. So of course they're just going to keep saying positive things. So and what all I'm warning is that you shouldn't just think, just because what Novogratz said this year was correct, that he's some kind of Bitcoin guru that you should always listen to, because again, he was wrong for year after year after year after year about all his Bitcoin predictions. So just like the gold bug, that one day will be correct when gold reaches $5,000 an ounce, and then will come out just like Novogratz says. And look, because they want everyone to go into gold at that point, say, I was completely right, I said gold would go to 5,000. You can't ignore the 8 prior years that gold bug said gold was going to $5,000 that year, and it never did. So again, this is not anything that I am being emotional about. It's nothing like, oh, I missed out on Bitcoin, because I'm always going to miss out on Bitcoin, because I have always said that I firmly believe Bitcoin, although you can make a lot of money off it, it's for speculators, and I'm not a speculator. So, because how many owners of Bitcoin are planning to hold forever? Probably not many, after being told that you should always hold forever to 2017, when it started correcting from 20,000 to 19,000 to 18,000, and you had people like Novogratz. Now, I don't know exactly if it was Novogratz specifically, but I remember reading articles during that time. They said, oh, don't worry, it's just a little blip, it's going to go right back to 20,000, then 40,000, then 250,000. And a lot of people held on forever, and held on all the way down to $3,000. So, nowadays, I think because there's so many owners that got burned at the end of 2017, I don't think people are like hold forever. They're going to make their money and at some point get out. Or there's not too many people that are using it to buy goods and services. So what does that mean, right? They're not paying for goods and services in Bitcoin, right? Like the majority of what they buy, they're not. So what does that mean? They're not holding it as a currency. They're holding it as an investment, whether it's long-term, short-term, medium-term investment. So very few of the overall owners are not speculators. Most are in it only for the upside, potential upside price rise that can be made off of this speculation. So right now the narrative, right, is that institutional money is pouring into it, and so the price should continue to hold steady and go higher in the short term, and that's still the dominant narrative. And as we all know, dominant narratives, they control the perception. What's more important to price behavior, perception or reality? Perception. So yes, I feel like there's probably a good chance that Bitcoin will rise to 20,000 and make it to that mark. But this is not a good thing like it's being sold, and I'll tell you why. Because institutional money, right, that's a narrative, institutional money is pouring into it, but it always has, because institutional money with digital, with Galaxy Digital, with Square, have always been in it. But the fact is, okay, that's not the institutional money you need to worry about. Novogratz, you need to worry about the institutional money like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, because that's the type of institutional money that's also speculative, because we've seen them push oil. We saw Goldman Sachs push oil up to $150 a barrel and then immediately collapse it and short it and make money both on the upside and downside down to 50, because speculators don't care which direction the price goes. That's the dangerous thing, right? Speculators don't care, because they can make money pushing the price higher. They can also make ton of money, and actually they can make money more rapidly by collapsing the price, because look how quickly Bitcoin collapsed from 20,000 to 3,000 in less than a year, right? So what happened in the futures markets, the speculators that were shorting Bitcoin made so much more money in a much condensed time frame than those that actually went long during that time. So the fact that institutional banking money is going into Bitcoin is not a good thing. Those are people just like Novogratz. Either they're doing one of two things. I actually think that they're just trying to sell their book. I don't actually think they're totally ignorant of how bankers use the futures market to manipulate prices. At least I'd be shocked if they're that ignorant and they don't understand how bankers use futures markets to manipulate prices. Anything that trades in the futures market, whether it's gold, silver, wheat, orange juice futures, soybeans, or whether it's Bitcoin. So I would actually say that massive rapid price declines are more likely once banking institutional money really comes into the market, not less likely as is being sold right now. So again, when your batting percentage is like 20% or whatever it is for Novogratz, for Tom Lee it's probably like 10%. That's not too good. So you shouldn't be listening to these people and just engaging in confirmation bias, saying that this is where it's going to go. You need to do your own research. And I should hope that every Bitcoin owner will find this podcast immensely valuable to them, because at what price will we likely see another pullback, rapid pullback? Well, all my patrons, right? All my SK Wealth Academy patrons know that at the end of 2017, I correctly predicted the very top at 20,000, and I correctly predicted a crash to 5,000. In fact, I know it went lower. I know it eventually bottomed at 3,000, but my prediction only took it to 5,000. When did I predict that? I predicted that once. I predicted it in two stages. So I predicted the pullback, the first stage from 20,000 to 10,000. Once it went to 10,000, I predicted it to 5,000. So it's not like I predicted it would go to 5,000 when it was to 6,000. It's not like I predicted Bitcoin would crash to 10,000 when it was already crashed from 20,000 to 12,000. I did 20,000, so it's a $10,000 drop, and then 10,000 to 5, which is another $5,000 drop. Now, what allowed me to do that, although I'm no longer subscribing to these services because, like I said, I don't really have any vested interest in it, whether it goes higher or lower. So I'm not subscribing to data mining services about the Bitcoin futures markets, but back then I was, and I saw a lot of behavior in the futures markets that predicted that a crash was coming. Because again, Bitcoin futures derivative products basically are the only mechanism by which people could short a certain commodity, because they do it all the time in gold and silver, right? So here's the other thing too, before I move on to this very, very important point that I'm going to come up with. Now, Raoul Pal, who is the CEO of Global Macro Investor, says he has more than 50% of his capital invested in Bitcoin, more than half. So of course this guy's going to talk it up again. He's just talking up his book. He said Bitcoin's going to go to 1 million in the next 5 years. Novogratz said Bitcoin's going to go to 60,000 at the end of 2021. I would really, really be surprised if Bitcoin is at 60,000 at the end of 2021. Again, that's just trying to prey on people's emotions to get them to pour more money into it, so his own $300 million investment can go up. And if it does a lot, if he's very successful in doing that, I guarantee you Novogratz will quietly sell out while he suckered all these other people to, enter this market at $18,000 or even 19, or even he'll still try to sucker people even at 20,000. So. Again, although, maybe I shouldn't say sucker because I don't know. Maybe it will go to 30,000, but probably 20,000 will receive a lot of resistance just because it was our previous high. And, I would expect some kind of correction in and around at that point, even if it does break through and eventually go higher. But here's the thing, okay? So Raoul Pal said, hey, I think $1 million is about right. Just from what I know from all of the institutions and of all the people I speak to, there's an enormous wall of money coming into Bitcoin. It's an enormous wall of money. Just the pipes aren't there to allow people to do it yet. I don't know who this guy is, but I don't know how you could be running a financial company and not understand that there is enormous money that's been allowed to come into Bitcoin. In fact, on September 30th, when the Chicago Mercantile Exchange increased the position limit on Bitcoin from 100 million to basically $200 million. It was 2,000 contracts, but at each contract being worth 5 Bitcoins, right? So that's 10,000 times just a $20,000 price. I know it's a little below that, but just to make the math easy, that's $200 million. So you tell me institutions being able to put $200 million into the Bitcoin market through futures is not a significant amount of money. Yeah, I know it's not like the billions they could put into gold, right? But $200 million per institution is still a lot. So maybe Raoul Pal has no concept and understanding of futures markets and how that influences prices and any type of asset that trades in the futures market. So, and lastly, he said, quote, I'm 100% sure that Bitcoin's going to massively outperform gold. Well, yeah, price-wise, it might, but like I said before, I've heard that same thing. Number one, you should never listen to anyone that says 100% sure, because they're just trying to talk up their book. There's nothing that's 100% guaranteed. If it were, then he says he's 100% sure, then ask him, if anyone out there knows who he is, are you willing to risk your life? You said you're 100% sure, so there's no 0% of you risk of you dying. Are you willing to be executed if from now gold at its price of what was it, $1,860, that it won't have a bigger percentage increase by the end of next year than Bitcoin at its current price from now to the end of next year? Because that's what he's saying. He said he's 100% sure. There's zero doubt that, because I heard that same thing, right? When Bitcoin reached 20,000, because a lot of people saw that as a pit stop to 40,000, right? I'm 100% sure Bitcoin will outperform. Well, since then, Bitcoin went from 20,000 to what, like 17,800 or whatever it is now, and gold was at around $1,250 back then, and it went to 1,860. So gold outperformed during that time. So again, anyone that says 100%, never trust that person. Now, this is one thing I don't know, but I put the link in the show notes below so you can go check it out yourself, because it was on Cointelegraph, which I believe is a reputable source of cryptocurrency news. Now, in the article, they said Bitcoin futures contracts can offer leverage as high as 125%. 125 times. So, in other words, at a 30 times leverage, right, you could enter Bitcoin contracts, say with initial margin of $100,000 and control $30 million, because that's 30 times, right? 100,000 to 30 million is 30 times leverage, right? And that is a whole lot of Bitcoin. You can control 30 million of Bitcoin with only $100,000 at just 30 times leverage. And in this article, they said Bitcoin futures contracts can offer leverage up to 125 times. That's only 30 times. So what does that mean? That means, as futures do with all commodity markets, they highly distort the real market. And that means there's no functional cap of the total amount of Bitcoin at 21 million. Because anytime there's leveraged products, that means what's happening is a lot more Bitcoins are trading than actually, I was going to say physically exist, but they don't physically exist, and actually digitally exist. Because that happens in like the gold futures markets, where in the futures markets, they'll trade like 100 times the amount of physical gold that exists in the entire world. So that basically destroys the cap on that physical gold would have in relationship to the gold price, because the futures market's destroying it. Because anytime you have that type of leverage, you're destroying it. So the fact that people say one of the best, greatest advantages of Bitcoin over fiat currency is that the total amount is capped at 21 million. Not true with futures markets, because there's a lot more Bitcoin that's trading due to the leverage than actually have been mined. So again, now, and the last thing I want to mention is, because all Bitcoin articles I always come across and just scan, they always speak of technical trading patterns, right? They always say, hey, these technical trading patterns show this and they show that. And again, it shows me that the vast preponderance of Bitcoin analysts have zero understanding of manipulation games bankers play in the futures market, which is extremely dangerous, right? Because the futures market open interest is at I think it's at an annual high for this year right now in 2020. Definitely at a multi-month high, definitely like at a 6-month high, if not the annual high right now. So as more and more players come into the market, that means, guess what? The price is going to be more and more susceptible to these big whales manipulating the price up and down. And what do we know already from every single other futures market that exists? Is that bankers always will manipulate the price to their own benefit, and often create artificial rapid price drops to make a crap load of money at the expense of their clients. So there's no reason to expect that this would not also happen in Bitcoin futures market. So the more institutions that move in, you're going to see like much greater volatility in Bitcoin prices as well, which will be harder to stomach in the future. So I think this is all information everyone should know. Like I said, with all the other people I've ever spoken to that have been Bitcoin owners in the past, nobody's aware of any of this I just told them. Nobody's aware how leveraged Bitcoin futures contracts are. Nobody's aware that the CBOE stopped trade. And here's the other thing, like I said, because perception, right, is always key over reality. Because I do know that, you know, the volume of trading is much greater in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange than the CBOE. But when the CBOE suspended futures trading, because there was a perception that, hey, here's like one of the mechanisms that causes volatility, downside volatility, and it's gone, even though the trading volume was very low in CBOE futures. The price, because the perception was now that Bitcoin futures are going to be allowed to they don't have this downward suppression price force on it. It's going to skyrocket, and exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. Go look up the date when the CBOE suspended Bitcoin futures trading, and you'll see that the price from then, it was pretty flat, pretty much trading up and down within a narrow channel, and then just took off after that. And again, there's shockingly no Bitcoin owner I know was aware of that. And it was aware of in 2000. Oh, here's the last thing I wanted to tell you. I almost completely forgot, was that I'm going to put a link into a U.S. Central Bank article they wrote in 2018. Because again, how did I predict that Bitcoin prices were going to crash from 20,000 to 10,000 to 5,000? It was all because of behavior I was watching in the Bitcoin futures markets back then. And the U.S. Central Bank actually wrote an article saying that indeed that there were players that used the futures market to crash the Bitcoin price in 2018. And a lot of people, again, they couldn't connect the dots. They couldn't see that when Bitcoin futures trading actually started on the CME, that Bitcoin price spiked at that point, and then it just started crashing. So I think it's really important. I'll put the link to that article, and so you can go read it. Because at a minimum, you should be aware of all these mechanisms to know how to protect yourself if you're in. And like I said, because how do I know? Because my patrons will know my predictions for gold and silver whenever the prices go down, because I'm not one of these non-thinking, uncritical gold bugs that always say, oh, price is going to go higher, higher, higher. I've told my patrons numerous times, in fact, even within this year, times gold prices are going to drop $70, $80, $90 an ounce, and that's exactly what they did. And it's based upon my understanding of futures markets. Now, like I said, I don't track Bitcoin futures behaviors closely. If I did, I probably could have a better semblance of what's going to happen with Bitcoin futures prices. But you should at a minimum understand, because there's a very intimate relationship, it's going to become much stronger between participation of these big institutional banks in the Bitcoin futures markets and price volatility. So hopefully this was of enormous value to all Bitcoin owners, as it should be. If you were not aware of these things, and then you go follow the links and just read up on it, just read up, okay? Because this is not even my area of expertise, and yet I find, which is quite frightening, that I understand these relationships like 1,000 times better than most of my friends that own Bitcoin, which is kind of scary because I refuse to participate. I don't, like I told you again, I'd rather be the slow and steady turtle that beats the hare that's going around all over the place. So in any event, again, I'm going to make one last plea, but because my GoFundMe campaign ends in 3 days, if you listen to the end, you found some value, then I would be so grateful if you could contribute to the launch of my SK Wealth Academy campaign. And again, this is the only time I've ever raised funds publicly. The only reason I'm doing this is, like I said, I have been unable to return home due to the Rona travel lockdown since March. So I've been 7 months. I've been a whole year without work because I can't work if I can't go home. So I need to really figure out a different plan, because this has just been killing me. This whole entire year has been killing me, because there are people like I've seen in Australia, right? People screaming out at hotels because they had a quarantine of 14 days, extended beyond 14 days. Imagine your quarantine being over 200. And of course, I can leave my apartment here, right? But basically I've been able to return home where all my resources are. Everything I own is back home. And it's been over 235 or 40 days now, I think. So people that are going insane in Australia, you know, tourists that have traveled and now have been quarantined over 14 days. Give me a break, man up. Okay, so if you want to go check it out again, I'd be so thankful. Just go to gofundme.com/F like fight /SKwealthacademy. Also, again, thanks so much to all my patrons. Thanks so much to all those that have donated because, I really want to try my best to keep these public podcasts free and not put it behind some kind of paywall because, over the years, I've had at least a couple hundred people say, hey, I'll pay you a couple bucks every month for your new site at malamalama.com/WordPress. If I have to pay you a couple months to access your articles, hey, I'm more than happy to do that. But I'd rather keep it free. It's been free for like over 16 years now. So I really don't want to put it behind a paywall. A lot of people say they find the information extremely valuable. I'd rather just keep it out there so more people know the truth. But, want to also emphasize that I do 100% rely on your support to keep those certain sites free because as I mentioned before, even my old YouTube channel, because every single video I uploaded was demonetized, although I had over 13 million views, my total revenue, and I'm not lying, I'm totally being honest about this, the total revenues I collected from over those 13 million views, because none of those views were like monetized, was $3.05 because it's $3.05. So I do need support to keep making content for free and uploading. And then again, if I disappear from this, please do come find me on K.im. K.im is an alternate social media platform that said they're not going to shadow ban, they're not going to censor truth, so I'm going to eventually transition over to them. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. If you're listening to this on Podbean, you can also go to skwealthacademy.podbean.com to download downloadable MP3 audio files for free if you want to listen to this podcast on the go or podcast in the future. Please do subscribe there. Please do rate it. I don't think anyone's rated my podcast on Podbean. Rating it does help me get more exposure. So in exchange for this free content, if you find any value, you could help me out by taking a minute out of your day and just rating it. Thanks so much. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day or evening. Take care.